Today, I want to share with you the power of surrender, the path to freedom and peace. Did you know there is tremendous freedom in a life of surrender to God? Recently, I've experienced the power of surrender again. In the midst of some challenging circumstances, I came to the end of myself and said, Lord, I can't do this anymore this way. I don't want to feel depressed and anxious and worried and irritable and grouchy. I don't want to go through these circumstances this way. Please help me. I need you. I can't do this on my own. And you know what happened? He answered me. And through daily surrender that I've been practicing, I've experienced a radical transformation from anxiety to peace, from depression to joy, and an increased awareness of God's presence and love. Well, in this video, I'm going to share 3 things you need to understand about how to experience the amazing freedom and peace of a life surrendered to God. In this episode, you're going to learn 1, why surrender to God is important. 2, how you can surrender to God. And 3, what it looks like to surrender to God. Welcome to Rise Up and Shine with me, Christine Raymond, where I help you to grow closer in your relationship with God, know your true identity in Christ, and fulfill your God-given purpose. I love to take what God has given me and share it with you so that as you apply these things to your heart and life, you will benefit from them too. So before we get into that, if you find this content helpful, just take a moment to hit the subscribe button or the follower button on this page so that you'll be notified when new videos come out. So let's dive into the 3 things you need to understand to experience the power of surrender. The first thing to understand about the power of surrender to God is, why is surrender to God important? Well, Jesus said that he came to earth to proclaim freedom to the captives. That's in Luke 4, verse 18. Many people view freedom as doing whatever you want, whenever you want. But you know, this only leads to slavery, to whatever you serve, whatever you've given yourself to in place of God. Even as Christians, we can become addicted, feel depressed, fear, burdened, stressed out, exhausted, disillusioned, and even hopeless. Well, Jesus talks about freedom differently. The way to freedom, according to Jesus, is living a daily life of trust and surrender to God and His ways. Surrendering to Jesus as Lord is a daily, continual choice. The more we learn to live in that place, the more we experience God's freedom and discover a life of peace, a life of joy that's not dependent on circumstances, and an increased sense of God's presence and love. Galatians 5:1, Paul tells us, "It is for freedom that Christ has set us free. Do not be entangled again with a yoke of slavery." If you're finding this content helpful, please let me know by pushing the like button. The second thing we need to learn about the power of surrender to God is, how can I surrender to God? You might be saying, how can I let go and trust Him? I've been disappointed and let down so many times. I don't want to get disappointed again. Well, I know that we've all been hurt and disillusioned by people, right? Unfortunately, in this life, that is just part of the deal. People are imperfect, including you and I, and sometimes make bad choices that hurt others. You see, God gave every human being free will, and human beings don't always use free will in a good way, and that leads to hurt and disappointment. Well, you might feel that God's people or the church has let you down. And I want to remind you that God's people are still people, and the church is made up of people. They are imperfect, and they are still in process, just like you and I. So don't equate that with God disappointing you in the church if people have disappointed you. But you may feel that God has failed you or let you down. I have certainly experienced that in my life. Sometimes there are very difficult circumstances, very, very painful betrayals or losses or things that happened or things that didn't happen. In my life, I experienced a lot of abuse. And when I experienced something again that was abusive and violent in my early 20s, when I was already a Christian, I said to God, why? I never expected this to happen when I'm a Christian. And so I felt very disappointed. I felt angry at God. I didn't know what to do with it. I felt like bringing anger to God was something that was not allowed, or I'm going to get in trouble if I do. But you know, after a while of stuffing the anger, I knew that it was just in my way, in my relationship with God. So I came to Him to ask questions. And I would encourage you, if you're in this place, come to God. He wants you to come to Him. If you read in the Psalms, you'll see that people expressed every kind of emotion, every kind of question, and God did not rebuke them. He didn't cut them off from Him. He wasn't even surprised. But you know, there's one question that usually is not productive, and I asked this too. I asked it for a while. Why, God? Why did this happen? Why did you allow this to happen? I wanted to understand why. And you know what? After a while, I realized I'm never going to get that. I'm never going to understand why a person can do that to another person, and understand why in this life, sometimes that is part of life. So I encourage you, if you have questions for God about things that have happened or not happened, talk with Him. He wants to talk with you about it. Another thing I would say that will help us to trust God and surrender to Him is to get to know the character of God. We can get to know Him as we read His Word. But God the Father said the best way He has ever spoken to us is in the person of His Son. When you see the Son, you see the Father. You see what God is like. And God demonstrated His love for us even while we were sinners by sending His Son to die so that we could be forgiven and we could live and be reconciled to God. God always has our best at heart, even when we don't understand everything. At one point in that journey, I came to the point where I said, well, God, I know you. I've walked with you for a number of years. I know your goodness. I've experienced so many wonderful ways that you have loved me and taken care of me. I don't understand this thing, but I want you more than I want to understand. And that became freeing in my life. Do I still want to know why? I guess I don't worry about it at this point, and if I need to know, I suppose I'll know that when I go to meet Him. But I suspect when I go to meet Him, I'll understand a lot more things, and I probably won't even care about that why question anyway. Another way to see the character of God is to read the fruit of the Spirit in Galatians 5:22-23. Those characteristics are just some of the characteristics that we walk in when we walk in the Spirit, enabled by the Spirit. Therefore, it is also the nature of God. And you can read in 1 Corinthians chapter 13, the love chapter. And when it says love is kind, love is patient, you can put God in place of the word love because God said He is love. So those are ways that you can invest in and meditate on getting to know the character of God. I can trust my husband because I know that he's a good man. I have a history with him, and I know that he is always looking out for my good. Is he perfect? No, of course not. Has he said some things that were hurtful at times? Of course, and so have I. But when you know someone, you can trust them. So come to know God for who He truly is. If you're finding this content helpful or have suggestions by future videos, please let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. And the third practical thing to understand about the power of surrender to God is, what does it look like to surrender to God? Well, Jesus said in Matthew 5:3, in the famous Sermon on the Mount, which was his signature message to us, he said, blessed, which you can also be translated as happy or to be envied, are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Now you may wonder what poor in spirit means. I think it can be simply translated as realize their need for Him, that we recognize our need for Him and we acknowledge it to Him. And this is not just once, but daily, because you and I need Him every day of our lives. Why is this person poor in spirit, realizing their need for Him, so blessed? It's because when we recognize that, we have the endless resources of the kingdom of heaven at our disposal. That's an awesome blessing. The original sin that Adam and Eve committed was choosing to live a life independent from God in their own wisdom and their own strength, instead of depending on God and trusting His way. You know what happened is that the devil told them if they have this fruit that they will be like God. And you know, they were already like God because God created them in His image. The devil is such a liar. They tried to get what they already had. Matthew 18, verses 3-4, Jesus said, truly I say to you, unless you change and become like children, you will not enter the kingdom of heaven. So there it is again. Whoever will humble himself like this child, he is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. To surrender to and depend on God is to humble ourselves, to acknowledge I am not God. I am a child who needs a parent. I am a child of God, and God is my loving parent. So I depend on Him, I look to Him, I ask for His help. The opposite of that is pride, thinking that I need to do it myself, or the only way to get it right is if I do it myself, and that my way is the best way. Well, you know, God resists the proud, but gives grace to the humble. Grace is the enabling presence of God. So the three things we need to understand to experience the power, freedom, and peace of surrender. Number one, true freedom is living a daily life of trust and surrender to God and His ways. Number two, there is trouble and hurt and broken people in this life, but God is good and He is trustworthy. And number three, surrender to God by coming to Him daily, acknowledging your need for Him, and living a life of dependence on and union with Him. This is the path to radical transformation and a life of freedom and peace. So I have two questions for you. The first one is, have you ever experienced the freedom of surrender to God? In the comments, just write yes or no. And which of these things do you really want to press into? So thanks for listening. I really enjoy this time I get to spend with you, and I hope it's a blessing to you. I look forward to seeing you in the next video on Rise Up and Shine.